So hello and welcome to Property Price Guru, where we discuss all things property with the leading experts and figures in the industry. Today, I'm delighted to be welcomed by Scott Windle from EXP. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Jacob. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Really good, thanks. How you doing? How you finding things?
Yeah, good. Yeah, trying to keep busy. Market's changing a little bit, as I'm sure we'll go into in a moment, but trying to keep busy and things are still ticking over at the moment. Thanks.
They are, yeah. It's interesting times, isn't it, at the moment? I seem to be saying that quite a lot recently. Interesting times, challenging times, those sort of phrases. But yeah, it's certainly no doubt keeping you on your toes.
You could say that.
It'd be really good, Scott, just to, as a starting point, just to touch a little bit on your background, because just before we came on, I mentioned obviously you were based in agency before setting up with EXP or starting with EXP. You had a bit of a history with independent agency and corporate. So you've got quite a wide view, really, in terms of different models of agency. So perhaps you could take us back and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in a state agency.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to be honest with you, Jacob, like most people, I didn't wake up one morning and think I want to be an estate agent. You kind of just fall into it, to be honest with you. And I think if you ask most agents, they'll probably tell you the same thing. So I did fall into it, straight from college. But I've been doing it for about 15 years. Absolutely love it. It's a great job. It's hard work. It's not what people expect. I think sometimes people think you just open doors for people and that's it. There's a lot more to it than that, obviously. But absolutely love it. So, like I said, I've been doing it for about 15 years. Like you mentioned, started off with corporate agency. It was great. The training was fantastic. The corporate side of it wasn't quite for me, if I'm being honest with you. There's lots of targets, not just selling houses. So that wasn't for me. So after spending a couple of years with a corporate agent, I joined a smaller independent. And yeah, I think I was probably with this independent for about 10 years. So learned an awful lot and sort of worked up from viewings to negotiator to then valuing in and then helping run the office as well. But about 12 months ago, it's always been something that I've wanted to do, run my own agency, and looked into it. There's various models out there, obviously, and there's pros and cons of all of them. But EXP, for me, it allowed me to do what I wanted, and it's been a really, really good 12 months. So been really busy, very hard work, but enjoying every minute of it.
Brilliant. What was it, you mentioned you started obviously with the corporate side. Do you think your sort of career plan might have had a different path or taken a different path had you started with independent and then gone to corporate? Do you think it was important that you started with corporate, or do you think it wouldn't have mattered, or how do you look back at that?
I mean, to be honest with you, like I said, some people absolutely love corporate, and it suits a certain type of person. The training that I had when I first started was absolutely brilliant, and I don't think that I'd have had that same training with an independent. I think with the independent, um, they obviously offer training, but I don't think it's in depth as with a corporate. So I really learned the job inside out and all the basics with this corporate. And then obviously I was able to then transfer that when I joined the independent agencies as well. Yeah, I think starting off with the corporate for me, it put me in good stead to do the job. And I learned all the ins and outs, like I said, and then transferred that to working with the independent.
How was it? Because on the corporate side, as a lot of people know, and you just touched upon there, obviously very, very sort of results driven, stats driven. Did that make it more difficult to provide the other side of it, which is perhaps the service element, because it
Yeah.
was so stats driven? Was that one of the main challenges that you faced?
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, my view is an estate agent is here to sell a house. We want to market the house, offer a good service, and get the property sold for the client. That's what an estate agent is to me. Now, obviously, there's other services that you can offer. You can offer financial advice. You can recommend solicitors and things like that, which is all part and parcel of the job. But I don't think, for me, I don't think it should be pushed. And I think with the corporate side of it, or certainly in my experience anyway, there was a lot of pressure put on you, not just to sell houses, but to have your FS referrals and have your referrals for your solicitors and things like that. And to be honest with you, the final nail in the coffin for me, which was the reason why I left, was I smashed my target for sales. I, smashed my target for actually getting people in front of the mortgage advisor, booking valuations and things like that. But I didn't refer anyone to our overseas department at the time, and they come down on me like a ton of bricks. The fact that I hadn't passed enough people across to go and buy a property in Spain, I think it was, from memory. So I come out of that meeting thinking, what, I've smashed my sales target, done all that, but I haven't passed enough people to buy a house overseas, which was kind of strange. At the time I was working in Trowbridge, so having people coming into the office in Trowbridge saying, have you ever thought about buying a property in Spain? It wasn't for me. So that was the final nail in the coffin. So yeah, I think there is, in my opinion, too much pressure on those other elements rather than just trying to sell houses and offer that first-class service, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I imagine you probably saw that going into high street agency for an independent. I imagine you sort of felt or saw that shift that was perhaps more so towards the service side rather than the stats-driven side. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's certain parts of the corporate world which are great. And obviously, I think, you need to take parts of it into the independent side of it, and obviously with me doing now what I'm doing with EXP, running my business, so it's not all bad, but I think you need to remember why you're here, which is offer excellent service and sell somebody's house. That's what it's about at the end of the day, getting them from A to B. And yeah, I think, like I said, it's important to keep parts of it, but not lose focus of what our job is, and the priority is to sell that property, get people moving.
I think it's interesting as well, and we'll sort of get on to EXP and that sort of self-employed model in a second, but it almost feels as if the models that perhaps haven't quite put emphasis on service as highly or prioritized it as much as they should, it almost feels that potentially paves the way for models like EXP now. I mean, I'm a huge fan of EXP, and you're looking at the reviews of pretty much every member. It's it's astonishing. I know yours are fantastic as well. It's so difficult to maintain a high number of stars in terms of reviews, especially once you've been doing it a bit longer and you build up a client base. But it seems that consistently, if you go onto Google and type in EXP, you look at pretty much every member, they're all really impressive. Whereas you compare that to not just corporate agents, but high street independent agents as well. You can get a bit more of a blend where some are really good, don't get me wrong, some potentially the reviews don't quite match up. So it's interesting that it seems to have gone that way. Is that something you feel when you first signed up to EXP 12 months ago? Is that something that was apparent to you, that actually this is more so about that personal touch and that service?
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, to be truthful, this might sound controversial, but I don't look at estate agency as a sales job. Obviously, there is an element of sales involved, obviously, but I look at it more as a customer service role and marketing. If you market the house, with good quality photos, videos, things like that. There's so many things that you can do now. Ultimately, you can't force somebody to buy a house. Yes, you can sell the benefits of that house to that person, but you can't force somebody to buy it. So, like you said, I don't look at agency as a sales role as such. It's more that marketing side of it and that customer service. And service is so important. The amount of times that I speak to people and they say, "Oh, I haven't spoken to my agent. They haven't told me this. They haven't told me that. They haven't told me what's going on." And I'm almost actually, passing on updates to these people who are in chains with me, and their agents aren't sort of doing this. So communication is so important. And with the self-employed models like EXP, it's great because it's just us. We're accountable. So we have to offer a good service, because if we don't, it's on our shoulders. There's no one else to blame. So service is so important. As and I'm sure you can probably tell, Jacob, from those reviews, really. It's not rocket science agency. It's just about doing what you say you're going to do and offering a brilliant service. And with EXP, you see, we don't have to deal with huge numbers of people. It's more quality, over those numbers. When people sell with me and with other EXP agents, we don't look at those people as a number. And I think sometimes with corporate, independent agents even as well, sometimes it's just another stat, whereas us, we really are, I think, on that journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you make a really good point. And on one of our previous videos, we're speaking to a self-employed agent, and he said exactly the same thing. And I think the key thing is, and he made a really good point, service is so key in any industry, but I think particularly for estate agency, because obviously predominantly all of your clients are very local to where you are. Some of them may well even know each other. And work spreads so fast. So if you're not delivering, that high level of service that people have come to expect, you're going to get found out pretty quick. The flip side of that is, if you're able to maintain that really high level of service, you're going to get recommended, you'll get the reviews, and I think long term that will definitely stand you in good stead. But it's interesting to see, obviously, the rise of EXP in recent years and other self-employed models that are similar. Have got a similar framework to them. They all seem to be focusing very heavily on that service orientated approach. What do you have you got any views in terms of the slightly longer term landscape of estate agency and what that might look like? Some people say they could potentially see less high street agents, fewer high street agents, or a shift perhaps in what the most common models would be. What's your view on that, sort of for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Ahead? It's a good question, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I jumped in now with the self-employed role rather than sort of waiting, another 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Look, my view is, I think there's always going to be a need for a high street agent. There's always going to be people who want to deal with somebody with a high street presence, and I get that. And I'm not naive enough to think that self-employed is the only way to do it. I'm not blinkered. I'm very open-minded. But I think if you ask the majority of people nowadays, where do you start your property search? If you're thinking you want to go and buy a house, what do you do? What's the first thing you do? And most people will probably say now, well, I start online. Whether that is, Rightmove or Zoopla or websites, I think that's where it starts. 10 years ago, maybe longer, people would say, well, I'm going to go down to the high street, on a Saturday afternoon, go into all the different estate agents, go and register with all those people, so they can, keep me updated with properties, because, the internet was not, it was nowhere near as big is what it is now. So I think my view going forward is there will always be a need, I think, for the high street, presence with agents, and some people will want to have that, which is fine. But I think my view is, if we fast forward, another 5, 10 years time, I think there'll be even more self-employed agents, because my buyers and sellers that I'm dealing with at the moment absolutely love that personal one-to-one approach. They can get hold of me, pretty much, whenever, any sort of, time of day, I'll always get back to people. And I think there's a lot of people that I speak to now, they don't like dealing with these larger companies. And when I say larger, I think that's even sort of independent to a degree, because if you look at like an independent office, quite often you'll have 3, 4, 5 different people working in there, which is obviously fine. But they end up talking to this person and that person, and it's sometimes they get mixed messages. I've even had that today from somebody I've spoken to about a property, one person in the office saying one thing and another saying another. So I think my view personally is, I think going forward, there'll be more and more people looking at the self-employed option. I think there'll be even more agents in the future, I think.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I completely agree. I mean, I think in terms of people dealing with agents where they're potentially slightly larger and they've got, for example, between 5 and 10 people in the office, probably one of the key things that people or the homeowner or client will miss out on in that situation is they're not dealing with one person on a very human level. It's probably the lack of getting to know them personally. Which is obviously the polar opposite to you, because it's obviously just yourself and you've got that personal connection with someone, which is actually really nice as well. And I think probably plays quite a key part. I mentioned earlier, Scott, about the video that you post on LinkedIn with the market updates that you do, that are really, really helpful videos. It was actually after one of those videos a couple of weeks ago that I reached out to yourself and
That's right.
suggested that you came on here and we talk a bit more about it. It was a really good video. And one of the key things you mentioned was, I think, potentially addressing the doom and gloom that is going on at the moment. And you made a valid point that, actually properties are still selling. There's still a marketplace there. And I think potentially we can get a bit carried away sometimes with what we're seeing on the news and what's on the
Mhm.
TV and turn on BBC website and
Mhm.
all 5 different stories about what may or may not happen. Well, can you
Yeah.
just give us a snapshot of what you're seeing at the moment in the local market? What's happening day to day?
Yeah, of course I can. I mean, look, I'm based in Chippenham, so Chippenham's in Wiltshire. Chippenham's a great place. We've got easy access to the motorway. We've got some fantastic schools close to London. We've got the mainline railway as well. So Chippenham as a whole, I mean, it might be different to other areas. So I can only talk about what I'm seeing at
Of
the
course.
moment. But look, bad news sells, doesn't it, at the end of the day, whether that be the news, papers, whatever. You've only got to turn the radio on or, the telly, and it's, all doom and gloom. And, look, let's not get away from the fact it is changing. The market is changing. Mortgage rates have gone up. The affordability side of it, what people thought they might be able to borrow or afford is very different from where it was 3, 6 months ago. But there is always a need for people to move, for whatever reason, whether it be, relocation, for jobs, whether it be upsizing because you've had a baby, or downsizing going the other way because the running costs of the house are far too much now, so you can't actually afford. You've obviously got the not as nice scenarios where you've got the death and separation, so you've got that as well. But look, there's always going to be a need where people need to move, and there will obviously be people who will choose not to because of various reasons at the moment. But look, I mean, this week alone, I've sold 2 houses. So
Clearly, there's
people
something
are
still happening, isn't there? There's,
correct,
there's, still, there's still something
correct.
there.
Exactly. There is, the market is still there. It's definitely slowing down. Don't get me wrong, but we're leading up to Christmas now anyway, and typically December can be a bit quieter anyway. So perhaps, I had this conversation with somebody earlier. Perhaps Christmas is just going to come a little bit earlier this year, so the market does, slow down a little bit more, quicker than we normally would expect. But my view is we haven't got a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the market. But I think once it all settles down, and there's already signs of things settling down a little bit, come the new year, I think things will probably get back to a little bit more normal. Now, I'm not saying the same levels as what we've had over the last 12, 18 months, because that's been insane. But I just think we're just returning to more of a normal market, really.
I think you make a really good point. I mean, obviously, the last 12, 18 months, the market has been crazy in
Mm-hmm.
most places across the UK, if not all across the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, to a certain degree, that's what I describe as a manufactured market, where obviously the government have brought in stamp duty holidays and various other incentives that have helped increase values and inflate values. There's probably an argument, in fairness, that it's perfectly normal and potentially the natural
Mm-hmm.
thing for it to soften and perhaps
Mm-hmm.
in the next 12 months drop down a little bit, even back to potentially pre-COVID levels.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, look, if we address the elephant in the room, everybody, everywhere you look, the market's going to crash, but I mean, no, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen at the end of the day. However, locally to Chippenham, prices over the last 12, 18 months, 24 months, they've gone up, 10 to 20%. That's an insane amount of money. And that's not the same for obviously every property, but on average, it can be anywhere from 10 to 20%. And that's crazy. Now, my view is I don't think the market's going to crash, or certainly not in this area for the reasons that I touched upon earlier. But I think there will be a correction of some point. I think over the next 12 months or so, I think prices will start creeping down a little bit. That's nothing to panic about because it's all relative at the end of the day. If you're buying and selling in the same market, it really doesn't matter. Because it's all relative. But I think over the next 12 to 18 months, yes, prices could start, coming down a little bit. Not all at once. I think it will be a slow, gradual process, but just getting back to a little bit more normal, really, I think.
I think it's really good advice. I mean, like you say, most people, there's always going to be the exception to the rule, particularly for first-time buyers that are clearly not selling, they're just buying, or someone at the other end of their property journey. But your typical everyday buyer is probably going to be buying and selling at the same time. And actually, within reason, it doesn't really matter what the market's doing, because if you're doing both at the same time, you're sort of protected.
Correct. Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right in terms of, there's always going to be that, for one reason or another, there's going to be people that need to move, which will naturally keep things moving along. But one thing, I'm not sure if you've had this issue in Chippenham over the last 12 to 18 months. I know there's a lot of agents in quite a few areas that have had challenges in terms of the number of properties coming to market, where stock levels have been sort of lower than perhaps expected. Is that is that an issue in your area as well at the moment? And is that something you expect? If so, will that continue, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, supply has been it's been a big problem. There's not been enough houses to go for the level of buyers that we had, and I don't think that's just Chippenham. I think that's up and down the country. I think we're all in the same boat there. That's still the same now, and we are starting to see fewer properties coming onto the market. But again, that's not uncommon for the time of year. But yeah, that has been a factor, and that's one of the reasons why prices have remained strong and gone up, because it's that supply and demand issue. Obviously, if more houses start to come on, or if more houses start to stick a little bit and not sell as quickly, so there's more choice for buyers, then again, that obviously might have an effect on pricing. But yeah, that's still a bit of a problem. But like we touched upon earlier, for me personally, I don't need to be dealing with big numbers anyway, and I don't want to be dealing with big numbers, so I don't want to be listing 10, 15, 20 houses per month, because I wouldn't be able to offer that service. So for me anyway, I only need to be listing 3, 4, 5 houses a month in. I'm happy.
Yeah.
So
it's a great way to look at it, because if you've got that outlook and that perspective of it, obviously you're not then hunting down properties, and you can actually just focus on delivering the best service possible, which creates a win-win, because obviously you're happy, you're going to have a happy client, and the cycle goes on. It's a great way of looking at it, rather than perhaps being in a pressured situation where you're thinking, oh, I've got to get another 10 instructions this month.
I have to list that house. Yeah. No, I get it. That's it. And the thing is, I mean, when you've got that mentality as well, sometimes when it's list at all cost, are you actually giving the client the right advice, or are you giving them the advice that's going to get you the job? So you've got to think about all of that as well, I guess. But no, I mean, stock will always, I think it'll be an issue for a little while. Yeah, I think. But I think everyone's struggling with that at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's certainly a lot of the agents I speak to, it seems to be an issue, across plenty of different areas in the country, and has been for a little while. And as you rightly said, presumably if that carries on next year, whilst there might be a softening of prices, you would imagine that will actually keep things at a certain limit, because obviously if the demand is still larger than the supply, then it's just simply not gonna drop too far from where it is, although there might be a softening in that time anyway. Scott, that's everything from my side, so thank you very much for your time, and appreciate you giving us a bit of a market update. What I'm going to do at the description of this video, I'm actually going to pop your details, Scott, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And if anyone is in the Chippenham area, and you're looking to get a valuation on your property, perhaps looking to come to market soon, or potentially at a later date and want some advice on the market, strongly recommend Scott. It'll give you some great honest advice, and definitely reach out to him if you'd like to get a bit of an update on what your property might be worth. Until next time, thank you very much for joining me, Scott. We're going to have a few more videos coming up in the next few weeks as well, where we're going to be speaking to more people in the industry as well. So I hope to bring you lots more content. So that'll be coming in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Scott.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jacob.
Bye.